We turn now to NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. He joins us from Brussels. Good morning to you, Mr. Secretary. I will get right to the latest reporting from CBS, which is that intelligence shows Russian troops have actually received orders to proceed with the invasion. And as David Martin reported, that goes down to the detail of how they would maneuver in their sector of the battlefield. How will NATO respond to this?
So our main responsibility is to make sure that all allies are safe and secure, and that we provide deterrence and defense to them. And that's the reason why we already have increased our presence, military presence of NATO forces in the eastern part of the alliance.
You'll be increasing
and also
that?
why we are ready to further reinforce that presence if there is an attack on Ukraine. This has been a crisis in the making for a long time, so therefore we have gradually increased our presence and as I said, ready to further reinforce that.
Now that Russia and Belarus have said those troops are staying in the north of Ukraine, does that mean NATO has to either, increase more advanced weaponry in the region or move in more troops, or is that still yet to be decided?
So we have already, since 2014, when Russia invaded and annexed Crimea and started to destabilize eastern Ukraine, Donbass, we have reinforced and implemented the biggest reinforcement of our collective defense since the end of the Cold War, with battle groups in the Baltic region, in Poland, with increased defense spending every year since 2014, and with higher readiness of the NATO forces. So we have implemented significant reinforcements of NATO already, and then over the last weeks and months we have added even more forces and troops to our presence in the east. I think what we are now faced with is a new normal in European security. We see Russia being willing to contest fundamental values for our security by the use of force and also by the threat of the use of force. And therefore, we have started already the work on more longer-term adjustment of NATO's posture, NATO's presence along the eastern flank.
We also know that U.S. projects there could be as many as 5 million or more refugees created by an invasion. What will NATO do if Russia weaponizes refugees and pushes them into your member states?
So first of all, the most important thing is to prevent a new armed attack on Ukraine, and therefore we support all efforts by NATO allies to find a political solution, and NATO is also ready to sit down in the NATO-Russia Council with Russia. If Russia decides to use force, there may of course be a large number of people fleeing Ukraine. The NATO response force, the forces we are prepared to deploy, for instance, to Poland, to Romania, to other neighboring countries, also have capabilities that can help to deal with migrant and refugee crisis, so that we can assist. We'll never be the first responder when it comes to refugee crisis, but we can help and assist the efforts of NATO allies. And we did that already in Poland and Lithuania when we saw Belarus trying to weaponize or use refugees and migrants as a mean to intimidate these countries last year.
Vladimir Putin personally oversaw some strategic nuclear exercises yesterday. Is this an attempt to intimidate NATO?
It is a way for them to demonstrate all the capabilities they have. This is a regular exercise, but it was planned for last fall, and now it happens in the midst of this significant Russian military buildup in and around Ukraine, with the largest concentration of combat troops you have seen in Europe since the end of the Cold War. So last week, actually, Russia said that they will step back. Russia is stepping up with more troops and higher and even closer to the Ukrainian border, and also the fact that this exercise, they said, should end today, will now continue. So all of this fits into the picture that Russia is preparing for an invasion of Ukraine.
Bigger picture, though, Ukraine's president blasted the West, as you know, yesterday when he spoke at Munich. He said the security architecture of our world is brittle, it's obsolete. The West is treating Ukraine like a buffer between itself and Russia. Exactly what is the timeline for Ukraine's membership in NATO?
We have not set any timeline for that, but NATO allies have been very clear that it is for Ukraine and 30 NATO allies to decide on membership, not Russia. And second, we have provided over many years significant support to Ukraine. We helped them to modernize their defense and security institutions, to strengthen their cyber defenses. And NATO allies, the United States, United Kingdom, Canada and others have also provided significant training and different kinds of military equipment, defensive weapons. So the Ukrainian armed forces are much stronger now with better equipped, better trained troops than in 2014. And this is not least because of all the support that NATO allies have provided over all these years.
Mr. Secretary General, we'll be watching closely what happens in the coming days. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you so much, Margaret.